Hello, my friends. Today I'd like to talk about expectations on the healing path because they are very important. They shape how we think the path is going to unfold, how we judge ourselves, how we think we're doing compared to some imagined, other person out there somewhere. And in truth, it's a very slow path. It's a difficult path. It is also, though, the most beautiful path I, at least, have ever encountered. And for me, it's been so worthwhile. And I know for many others it has been too. This path of somatic healing, emotional healing, healing at the level of the body, which is where the pain and the suffering, the impact of life has been felt. And the reason I'm shooting this video is because, a lot of my other videos and many other videos you see on the internet, they are quite reductionist. They simplify things down. They put our problems in boxes. Say, this is, we've got this problem over here. Then you just slap a technique on it and just go there. Just if you have that problem, just do this technique and you'll be all right. And you have this problem over here and you slap this technique. And there's a sense of like, well, I'm over here and I've done all this work and I'm completely fine and I've healed myself totally and you have no idea what you're doing and therefore what I say is of super importance. And it sets us this sort of imbalanced dynamic. And even if you're not setting out to do it that way, it kind of can come across that way. And this is all very reductionist. Your problems aren't just in a little box to have a technique slapped on it. I don't know anything more than anyone else really. I'm just a guy who's just stumbling through life and is sharing what he's learned along the way. I'm far from perfect and make mistakes all the time in all areas of life. And it's just that I've put a lot of time into this particular area, a lot of effort. And so there's some things that I like to share, and hopefully it can be taken in that light. And this is one of them, right? That the techniques, this reductionist approach of just do steps 1, 2, 3. There's a real utility to it. There is a truth to it. It does work to a certain extent, right? A lot of the techniques that people share, that I share, are really effective and can be really great for a lot of people, but not for everyone, right? And people get very confused when they try and do the techniques and they don't work. And it feels like, okay, I'm doing something wrong. And this is, I guess, the core problem that I'm talking about here is the way we talk about all of this stuff. It gives the impression that to the person listening or trying to hear, it's like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. There's something wrong with me. I must be broken. I must not be stupid because I don't understand. And it's like, no, that's not what's going on. It's that everyone's having to talk about this stuff in very simple ways that don't really do justice to the complexity of you and your life and all the different variables and things going on. There's your environment, who you live with. There's your history, your unique nervous system and how your emotions uniquely unfold. There's the diet that you eat. What you had for breakfast will change things. There's your internal characteristics of how much capacity you have in your nervous system or how ready you are at a certain point to do certain things. Or how well you've been taught, or just, what you've gone through in life. Some people have been, been really mistreated in a way that means they don't have much trust or confidence in themselves, which is absolutely not their fault in the slightest. It's just a tragic thing. This is the way that life has unfolded. And that, it's harder for them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and start to, engage on this healing journey, right? And, my heart goes out to everyone who's struggling with this because it's, we start off in so much pain. I remember when I started this stuff, just coming out of a decade of alcoholism, just totally numb, anxious as hell, confused, just grabbing at everything I could for some solution to my suffering, right? It's a horrible place to be in. And it's, a lot of luck is involved in finding our way through here, stumbling into the right teachers or the right facilitators or the right books, or having a good friend who's able to support us at the right time, or family who can take us in, if we need a break, all this kind of stuff. So know that, wherever you're doing, you're absolutely doing your best, and that there's nothing you could be doing more, and there's nothing you ever could have done more. That it's not a question of willpower and trying harder. It's not pulling yourself up out of the swamp by your own hair, as Nietzsche put it. There's so many variables in this. The only thing that you can ever do is just put one foot in front of the other. That's pretty much the only technique when it comes down to it. You just put one foot in front of the other and try your best. And that's what everyone is doing. And to help us understand a bit more of these expectations, again, it's one common expectation is that we just, you just start doing the techniques and then you feel better, and you just, it just goes like that. It gets easier and easier. Whereas in reality, it's a slow, very messy journey. We're rewiring our nervous system when we start to do this work, changing ourselves at fundamental levels. And that has different impacts in different ways. We can often start to feel worse before we feel better, for example, because as we start to connect to the body and start to get access to our emotions, they start to, all the stuff from the trauma and the pain can start to come to the surface. And it's not that wasn't there before. You just weren't aware of it, and it's coming to the surface now, but it feels like something is now going wrong. And all this pain, where did all this pain suddenly come from? And it's just that you're now more aware. And you can go on a zigzag journey of, going into these, these pits of despair and emotional pain as all this stuff starts to rise to the surface. But that's exactly the process you need to actually process through some of that and then come into a more spacious, expanded place afterwards. And the cycle tends to go through these contractions, these dark places, before then opening up into more spaciousness. And it sort of like contracts like this. But we get more expanded on average sort of over time, and that's really the healing journey. But it does feel like a roller coaster as we're going through it, and it can be very confusing, particularly if you at the beginning when you haven't really got used to this contraction expansion model of how it unfolds. And it can be painful to start to acknowledge where we're at, to start to look at some of the depth of what we're carrying with us. Maybe there's some regrets for how we've been living our life that need to be met. Maybe we feel ashamed at where we are at our life at a particular moment. We feel like we should be further along than we are. If you feel these things, you're far from alone. I promise you, everybody has these regrets and this sense that we should be further along than we are. I certainly do. But that kind of cringe, that pain is the path. Right, the slowness, the messiness, the regret. This is actually the path to growth, right? We want the path to growth to be something that's like smooth and easy, but then there wouldn't be any growth. Do you see what I mean? If we took the smooth, easy way, that wouldn't do anything for us. That wouldn't change us. It's the rough that actually is what transforms us. Now, this isn't to say that if you're going through hell, that's great and thumbs up. I know it's incredibly painful, nor that you should push yourself beyond your capacity. And sometimes life can take us beyond our capacity, right? It's more than we can handle. And that's where things, that's where we need additional help and support. I'm not talking about, anything extreme here. I'm just saying that it is a difficult journey, and that difficulty is sort of part and parcel of it, not just for you, but for everyone on it, right? Again, I'm trying to just redress expectations here a little bit. Not invalidate your suffering, right? If it's going too far, I know it's it can be incredibly tough. For that reason, it's important to celebrate small wins. Little wins of starting to become a little bit more aware of how you're feeling. This is huge. That's a massive shift. When you have just become more aware of some patterns. That's a huge shift. If you even just have the insight one day, I need to change how I'm doing things. That's huge. This is amazing. If you start to notice just small shifts in your experience, maybe you start to process little chunks of emotion, and you notice a little bit more lightness in how you're going about the day. Again, this is a massive win in my book, right? Like huge appreciation for yourself, and you should be so proud of all of these little steps. Because they're so not easy, and most people don't even get this far as to taking these little steps, right? And we can concentrate a lot of the time on how much further we have to go, always. But it's counting those little steps is key. Another point that's important to raise, that it influences expectations, is that how people talk about this and how I talk about this stuff and the path is, it seems very individualistic. Like you're just this one person on the path alone and you have to do it all yourself. And if you can't do it just by yourself, then again, there's something wrong with you. This isn't the case. We need other people. We heal really in community at the deepest level. And I know what's been most powerful for me is, as a facilitator, I know other facilitators, and I trade sessions with them, and it's always, the deepest work has always come with someone else sitting there with me, supporting me, or being on retreat or something like that. Or I've gone to see a lot of different I use the word healers. I must mean like myofascial release therapists is someone, or gone on plant medicine retreats, or gone to see somatic therapy or somatic inquiry people. And it's with their support that I can really go deep. And it's when friends who I have who've listened to what I have to say on my journey and listening to what's going on for me, right? This is really healing. And then I feel heard in that journey. And it's not just me doing the work alone. That's how I like to present it sometimes. It's bullshit. It's not true. We need other people on this. And so finding people who can support you and listen to you is one of the most important things that you could do, or the opportunity you could have. Right. It's not just this, I am this macho warrior who can just, walk the path to hell and back alone. That's not how it goes. At the same time, no one else can do it for you. So it does ultimately come back to you in a sense. You have to step into that relationship where you can receive some healing from someone else, right? And you still have to go there. In my sessions with all these other people, I still had to go to that place and feel that pain for myself. So there is still that responsibility in a core way, but we need to be held and supported by a bigger container, right? And that bigger container is ultimately just the whole universe supporting you to move through your life. But at a lower level, it's the place you live. It's the relationships you have. It's the facilitators and helpers and trainers that you find, right? And I also feel like acknowledging that, I have, for different people in different situations, they have different capacities to do this kind of stuff. I've been very privileged in my life in general, but also I had, when I started doing this work, I had a corporate job. I didn't have any kids. There was a lot of time and resources I had to be able to dedicate towards it, for which I'm incredibly grateful. Not everyone has that, and expectations have got to be adjusted accordingly. And those different situations offer different opportunities as well. Your family, that requires a lot of effort and time, but there's also a lot of love that if you that can, and support that can come from that. So it can go both ways. But I appreciate if people have a big family, they have to work a lot, work long hours to support. There's going to be a little bit less time for this kind of work. That said, I'm not going to say that this stuff's ever going to be a barrier. Certainly having a job or having a family is no barrier to doing this work. But sometimes it can, take a little bit of extra effort. Really, it's reminded me of Zen, that almost everything is grist to the mill. So it's like, often teachers I know have said that their kids are their best teachers, right? Because they bring up their stuff, they show them, they're a mirror. They're just like this raw mirror that reflects where you're at in life. How annoyed you're getting at your kids, or how frustrated you are, or whatever it might be. What else do I want to say? Finally, maybe just leave you on this, that even to contemplate this work is a courageous act. Moving towards our own pain, meeting ourselves is difficult. Carl Jung has that famous quote, we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by, I can't even remember how it goes, but by confronting our own darkness, something like that. And it's a brave move. But like I said, the more darkness we confront, the more space for light there is. It's almost a law of the universe that the more of your own pain you're able to metabolize and integrate, the more you feel like yourself, the more you feel whole, the more you feel authentic, the more you radiate a certain beingness that others start to pick up on. The more satisfying life becomes, the happier you are. Again, there's still a roller coaster going on, but on average, that's where you that's where you end up. I certainly wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And the glorious thing and terrifying thing is there is no end to it. It keeps going and going and going. It just deepens forever and ever. And you don't have to go that far, but if you want to go forever and ever, the option is available. I hope that helps clarify a few things. That was a slightly rantier video than my normal style. I quite like it. Maybe I'll do a bit more in the future. Take care, everybody. See you later.